Good evening, friends, and welcome to this circle. Welcome to this night which gathers us toward its darkness, to face the shadows in our story, the shadows in our history, the shadows of violence that have harmed so many even in this very week. We gather in gratitude for this land, the traditional territory of the Papas-Chase Nation. We gather to celebrate the culture and spirituality, the rituals and language, the teachings of the Métis and Cree people who have made their lives in this land for generations. As we shape this circle with each other, we deepen our intention to live in the light of respect and reconciliation with our Aboriginal brothers and sisters. And we come this night in the midst of all that is, to seek wisdom's light, to find peace in the midst of the painful realities of our lives and our world, and to strengthen our capacity to resist injustice, to reject violence, and to continue the revolution of love that the life and teachings of Jesus of Nazareth inspire among us. And so we invite one another to come and be here. as the darkness falls around us. From corner or limelight, from fears or sadness, from hope or from gladness, in close relationship or from separate lives. To hear and experience the stories of this season, to deepen our commitment to the fullness of life. To deepen our reverence for life and our commitment to embody integrity and compassion that we've learned in the life and teachings of Jesus of Nazareth. We light this candle knowing it's better than cursing the darkness. We light this candle knowing that morning never fails to be born of night. We light this candle in the conviction that the power of love is greater than any force on earth. However fragile the flicker of goodness, however fierce the winds of harm, we are never without the power of light and love. And so it is that we pray with one another. We dwell in the presence of passionate and courageous love, amid the stark memory of violence which this day remembers. May we be driven deeper in our longing for justice and wholeness for all that is wounded in our world. May we recognize the movement of love that compels nonviolent action, standing against abuse of power, and walking with those in greatest need. May we be open to continue the revolution of love, which Jesus of Nazareth embodied in his life and in his death. May it be so.
Words and story that give us and that shape this Good Friday. From chapters 14 and 15 of the Gospel of Mark. On the first day of unleavened bread, when the Passover lamb is sacrificed, Jesus' disciples said to him, "Where do you want us to go and make preparations for you to eat the Passover?" So he sent two of his disciples, saying to them, "Go into the city and find a room in the upper room of a house, and ask the owner, 'Where is a guest room where I may eat the Passover?' He will show you a room furnished and ready. Make preparations for us there." So the disciples set out and went to the city and found everything as he had told them, and they prepared the Passover meal. When it was evening, he came with the 12, and when they had taken their places and were eating, Jesus said, "Truly I tell you, one of you will betray me, one who is eating with me." They began to be distressed and say to him one after another, "Surely not I." And Jesus said to them, "You all will become deserters." Peter, one of the 12, said to him, "Even though all become deserters, I will not." Jesus said to him, "I tell you, this day, this very night, before the cock crows, you will deny me 3 times." But he said vehemently, "Even though I must die with you, I will not deny you." And all of them said the same. Later, after the arrest, they took Jesus to the high priest, and all the chief priests, the elders, and the scribes were assembled. Peter had followed him at a distance, right into the courtyard of the high priest, and he was sitting with the guards, warming himself at the fire. Now the chief priests and the whole council were looking for testimony against Jesus to put him to death, but they found none. For many gave false testimony against him, and their testimony didn't agree. Some stood up and gave false testimony, saying, "We heard him say, 'I will destroy this temple that is made with hands, and in 3 days build another, not made with hands.' But even on this point their testimony did not agree. Then the high priest stood up before them and asked Jesus, 'Have you no answer? What is this that they testify against you?' But Jesus was silent and did not answer. While Peter was below in the courtyard, one of the servant girls of the high priest came by. When she saw Peter warming himself, she stared at him and said, 'You also were with Jesus, the man from Nazareth.' But he denied it, saying, 'I do not know or understand what you're talking about.' And he went out into the forecourt, and the cock crowed. And the servant girl, on seeing him, began again to say to the bystanders, 'This man is one of them.' But again he denied it, and after a little while the bystanders again said to Peter, 'Certainly you are one of them, for you are Galilean.' But he began to curse, and he swore an oath, 'I do not know this man you're talking about.' And at that moment the cock crowed again. And Peter remembered that Jesus had said to him, 'Before the cock crows twice, you will deny me 3 times.' And he broke down, and he wept. As soon as it was morning, the chief priests held a consultation with the elders and scribes and the whole council. They bound Jesus, led him away, and handed him over to Pilate. Pilate asked him, 'Are you the king of the Jews?' He answered him, 'You say so.' Then the chief priests accused him of many things. Pilate asked him again, 'Have you no answer? See how many charges they bring against you.' But Jesus made no further reply. Then the soldiers led him into the courtyard of the palace, that is the governor's headquarters, and they called together the whole cohort. And they clothed him in a purple cloak, and after twisting some thorns into a crown, they put it on him, and they began saluting him, 'Hail, King of the Jews!' They struck his head with a reed, spat upon him, and knelt down in homage to him. After mocking him this way, they stripped him of the purple cloak and put his own clothes on him, and they led him out to crucify him. It was 9:00 in the morning when they crucified him. And later that afternoon, Jesus gave a loud cry and breathed his last. And all the crowds who came together for this spectacle, when they observed what had happened, began to return home. There were also women looking on from a distance. Among them were Mary Magdalene and Mary, the mother of James, and the younger, and of Joseph and Salome. These used to follow him and provided for him when he was in Galilee. And there were many other women who had come up with him to Jerusalem, who were there, surrounding him. These are words we inherit from a first-century community. May we find wisdom for our living.
These are the words of Deborah McGlauflin, written in March of 2015. Her poem, The Companion's Prayer. Be it peaceful or arduous, come it swiftly or slow without need to know, may I patiently remain. In the here and now, in the bare whatsoever, with no need to alter, may I calmly remain, without foisting my faith, without senseless chatter, with a touch that is tender, may I gently remain. This is the poetry of a contemporary American writer.
The Clash once sung lyrics that go like this, and I think you'll recognize, if not the words, then perhaps the melody also. Should I stay or should I go? If I go, there will be trouble, and if I stay, it will be double. Should I stay or should I go now? That's never an easy question. When the going gets tough around us, perhaps it's easier to leave than to stay. Leaving means we don't have to deal with whatever it is anymore. Leaving means protecting ourselves. Leaving means focusing on something else, something more pleasant, perhaps, something we can handle. Leaving, like our encoded fleeing instincts scream, is about self-preservation. Leaving is about the raw emotion of, if I don't get out of here, I just might die. For us, staying opens us to a whole lot of hurt. Sometimes staying is the embodiment of the Cure's song, that the trouble will be double. Staying means we suffer with someone. Staying means we'll probably lose some tears. We'll feel deeply the hurt of another. Sometimes staying means a confrontation. Sometimes staying means a choice to stand in the hurt, to stand with the dead or the abused or the accused or the suffering. Staying means we'll have to look inside ourselves, stare into our own fears, and find there something that will help us, a strength that isn't about speed or muscle, but about tenacity, about compassion, empathy, and patience. On the Friday that Jesus was executed, lots of choices were made. not least the ones by the religious and civil authorities that let one more death come down as anybody's decision but their own. As the story goes, Jesus stood in front of the accusations for the most part in silent protest. Making what he was teaching about a vision for the world of compassion, a vision for forgiveness, a vision of access for everyone to a spirituality that is their own. And in that silent standing before his accusers, seeing those visions through to their unfortunate conclusion. But at the end, when it was just one man and his crew, his friends, his disciples, his traveling companions, against all the power and the authority in their world, most of them left. Not one of the traditional 12 that we've known as the 12 disciples stayed. They fled. Too dangerous, too disappointing, too confusing, too difficult, too painful, too who knows what. One of them, Peter, acting in exact opposition to his own intentions and promises that he made one day earlier. And yet amazing that it got written into a first century document, amazing that it wasn't redacted over the centuries as so much was, amazing that we find just 2 lines in that story that say, "And there were many other women who had come with Jesus to Jerusalem who remained on the hill." These women who had supported this community of travelers and teachers in their homes with their money, with their full commitment as companions on the journey, these women stayed in solidarity with their dying teacher and with each other, in presence with him and for each other. Their presence earlier in the day at the court, at the temple, through the streets, could do nothing to change the outcome. Their presence at the moment of crucifixion could solve nothing, except to be what would be an excruciating reality to behold. Their presence for the hours through the heat of the day watching him die could not have been anything but misery. Between them and him, guards that made it impossible to help or ease, impossible to do anything except be on the hill and be present. And so that's what they chose to do. They chose to stay, not because it would make any difference in the outcome, but choosing to stay because it made all the difference for another. Barbara Ehrenreich, in her book Bright-Sided, How the Relentless Promotion of Positive Thinking Has Undermined America. She reflects on her experience with being diagnosed with cancer. In the days and weeks following that diagnosis, she found herself immersed in a culture of positive thinking. Much to her surprise, she found that the pervasive tone in her own breast cancer community was of an optimism that left her feeling lonely and denied. Her experience was that of isolation that increased the more she delved into books and articles and support groups that pushed a positive attitude, that pushed lots of pink, and breast cancer teddy bears. But what she didn't find, she writes, was anything that seemed to support her as she went through feelings of pain and anger and frustration. I can look back to times that I've tried foolishly to cheer someone up when they've told me bad news. Or the feelings I've felt when someone has, in so many words, told me to smile. Despite what we think is needed by those who turn to us for support, most of the time, as we all know, the one thing they need is to be heard. Sometimes our life circumstances are pretty discouraging. Disease, divorce, layoffs, losing loved ones. Reading the paper or the online news is an exercise that takes our own sanity into our hands. All of this life circumstance happens to everyone, and everyone feels angry, sad, or frustrated in response. In essence, when this happens, and I think it's happened to all of us, we're being told that our feelings are not only invalid, but they're also inappropriate. When we step back to ponder what we need in those circumstances, we know intellectually that what we're genuinely seeking is a loving, compassionate presence. Anyone in pain is seeking a loving, compassionate presence. Not a silver lining, not a prescription for how to feel better, but someone that won't run away. Being completely present with one who's suffering means being able not just to be present with that person, who we may know under very different circumstances, happy circumstances, pleasant ones. We're not just asked to be present with that person. We're asked to be present with the person as they are at the moment. We're asked to be present with their pain, with the suffering itself. And that's why it's so darn frightening to stay rather than go. Perhaps it's the very definition of compassion, to be present with someone suffering. We may love the person to bits, but we have to stay present with their pain, and of course that's painful. I'm grateful to those who acknowledge the challenge in that, the real difficulty of that, and what it requires of us to be that kind of person, to be the kind of people like the women who stayed at Jesus' side, the kind of person that we've all experienced, who even though it's excruciating, will hold our hand as we experience it. The words of our poet speak to our earnest and practical prayer to be and to live like that. Be it peaceful or arduous, come it swiftly or slow, without need to know, may I patiently remain. In the here and now, in the bare whatsoever, with no need to alter, may I calmly remain. Without foisting my faith, without senseless chatter, with a touch that is tender, may I gently remain. Good Friday reminds us that there will be losses in life. There will be pain and there will be death and there will be innumerable challenges. Ones that if we read them to our friends would inspire tears and grieving. To live fully is to experience all of that. Good Friday is a story of, even in the midst of standing up for injustice, a story of consequences, of coming face to face with domination and control, and unjust systems, that even in that act and work of justice, there's excruciating pain that needs a presence. The integrity of this night invites us to stand with another when it's possibly the most painful thing we could do. It reminds us that not all of our actions are tasks with goals and objectives. We're reminded that we're always challenged to ask ourselves not which is the easier road, but which is the needed one. This night's story reminds us that compassion is costly, that it may take every ounce of our strength. It causes us to see and to hear, to experience that which we would rather not. And to face our own past and our own fears. And so it is that the story of this night asks where it is that we might stand. Or maybe it's not standing, maybe it's sitting. Where will we sit with another? Where will we be present to another? And to find how we ourselves need the wisdom to stay and the strength to patiently remain. Let's enter into a time of prayer where we share and strengthen our intentions to live as this story has inspired us to live, as the story of Jesus of Nazareth has inspired the world to live, to stand, and to love. Let's share our intentions with one another. We gather on this day to nourish memory and strengthen our intention to live in ways that will bring hope and healing to our wounded world. By acknowledging the wounds of the past and the pages of violence authored by humankind, we seek to remember our future in a better way. We will not be satisfied with blaming the victim or playing the victim. We will not pretend that nothing is wrong. We will not accept the excuses that have attempted to justify collusion and silence and complacency, inhumanity and atrocity. We refuse to accept cruelty and suffering as a path toward the good. We will not fail to seek a better way. We will not be complicit with injustice, nor will we accept violence in silence. We will seek to speak and live in ways that disarm and bring peace and fairness. We will stand with victims and seek to understand those who victimize. We will not settle for easy answers. We will work toward learning and living the wisdom of Jesus of Nazareth. We will not use the life or death of Jesus to justify, condone, or excuse violence. The cross will remind us of the imperial intolerance of dissent and the crossroads where our convictions often take us. We will refuse to see violence anywhere as an act of good, an act of God, divine judgment, a just or holy war, or the will of any God. We've got nothing. Amen. We will seek to bring the light of our deepest convictions and compassion to outshine cowardice, hatred, and complicity. We pray in the spirit of persevering love. Amen. As we go into this night, we leave with a willingness to enter the challenge of the world, the pain of the world, the tragedy and turmoil of the world. But we also leave knowing the power of compassion and love to meet that challenge eye to eye. We leave with hope of great courage to meet the night as it is, to persevere through the darkness, and to abide in the significance of our willingness to remain, to stay, and then to return, knowing and with the intention of new beginnings. May we go into this good night, alive to the hope of love and presence.